The Krellian transport ship hummed through the void, its massive hull cutting through space like a knife through darkness. Inside the briefing room, Commander Vextar stood before a holographic display, his four arms crossed over his chitinous chest. The assembled soldiers of the Galactic Alliance watched with their various sensory organs as images of a blue-green planet rotated slowly. "This is Earth," Vextar announced, his mandibles clicking with each word. "Home to a species called humans. They've recently achieved faster-than-light travel and have petitioned to join our alliance." A ripple of amusement passed through the gathered soldiers. The Thorian warrior Grunt let out a deep rumble that passed for laughter among his kind. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with skin like granite and muscles that could crush steel, he found the whole situation entertaining. "Look at them," Grunt said, pointing one massive finger at the human military footage playing on the screen. "They're so small, so fragile. Their skin tears like paper, their bones break like twigs. They need machines to fly, suits to survive in space. How can they possibly contribute to our military?" The other soldiers murmured agreement. There was Zephyr, the avian scout whose hollow bones allowed her to move with impossible speed. Her feathers rustled as she tilted her head, examining the humans with eyes that could see across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. "Their reaction times are pathetic," she observed. "I could strike them down before their primitive nervous systems even registered my presence." Next to her, the Aquarian named Tide flexed his tentacles, each one capable of generating enough pressure to cut through titanium. His translucent blue skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns that indicated amusement. "They can't even breathe underwater without assistance. On my homeworld, they drown in minutes." Even the synthetic being called Node added its analysis. Its crystalline form pulsed with data streams as it processed information about human physiology. Their computational abilities are severely limited. They require external devices for even basic calculations. Their memory storage is inefficient, and they suffer from numerous cognitive biases. Commander Vextar raised one of his arms for silence. "Nevertheless, the Council has approved their petition. We are to conduct joint training exercises with their military forces. Consider it a formality before they're assigned to support roles." "Support roles?" Grunt scoffed. "They'd be better suited as cooks or cleaners. Keep them away from real combat." The commander's expression remained neutral, though his antennae twitched slightly. "The humans have specifically requested to demonstrate their special forces capabilities. They're sending someone called a Navy SEAL sniper to participate in our combat trials." This announcement was met with outright laughter from the assembled soldiers. The idea of a human special forces operator competing with the galaxy's finest warriors seemed absurd. "One human," Zephyr chirped, "against all of us? This will be embarrassing for them." "Perhaps we should go easy on the creature," Tide suggested, his voice gurgling like water through a drain. "We wouldn't want to accidentally kill it during training." Node's form flickered as it ran probability calculations. Statistical analysis suggests the human has a 0.03% chance of completing even the basic combat trial. Commander Vextar's mandibles clicked in what might have been disapproval. "The trials will proceed as normal. No modifications." The human insisted on standard parameters. "Their funeral," Grunt muttered, cracking his massive knuckles. 3 days later, the Alliance soldiers gathered at Combat Trial Station 7, a massive complex floating in the asteroid belt of the Proxima System. The facility was designed to test the limits of the galaxy's most elite warriors, with environments that could be adjusted to simulate any battlefield condition. The soldiers were warming up in the main arena when the human arrived. The collective reaction was one of disbelief and poorly concealed amusement. The human male stood barely 1.8 meters tall, dwarfed by even the smallest Alliance soldier. He wore simple tactical gear that looked primitive compared to the bio-enhanced armor and energy shields of his counterparts. His face was covered in paint that formed a camouflage pattern, and he carried what looked like an ancient projectile weapon. "That's their special forces?" Grunt bellowed with laughter. I've seen younglings more intimidating. The human said nothing, simply nodding to Commander Vextar and taking his position. His movements were economical, precise. Where the alien soldiers strutted and displayed their impressive physiques, the human simply observed, his eyes scanning the environment. "Greetings, human," Commander Vextar said formally. "I'm told you're called Chief Petty Officer Marcus Chun." "Just Chun is fine, sir," the human replied, his voice calm and professional. Zephyr fluttered closer, her talons clicking on the metal floor. "Tell me, Chun, how fast can you run?" "My species can reach speeds of 200 kilometers per hour in short bursts." Chun's expression didn't change. "Fast enough, ma'am." This earned another round of laughter. Tide slithered forward, his tentacles leaving wet trails on the floor. "And how long can you hold your breath?" "I once spent 3 days submerged in the methane seas of Titan." "Long enough, sir." The simple responses seemed to frustrate the aliens, who were used to pre-combat boasting and displays of dominance. Grunt stepped forward, having to bend down to look Chun in the eye. "Do you even know what you're getting into, little human? The combat trials aren't simulations. Real weapons, real danger. We've had casualties before." For the first time, Chun smiled slightly. "I've been in real combat before, sir. I'll manage." "Real combat?" Grunt snorted. "Against other weak humans, maybe. You've never faced anything like us." Chen's smile faded back to professional neutrality. "If you say so, sir." The lack of reaction infuriated Grunt, who was used to intimidating opponents before battle. He turned to Commander Vextar. "Permission to give the human a demonstration?" Vextar's antennae twitched. "The trials don't begin for another hour. Just a friendly sparring match," Grunt insisted, "to help our new ally understand what he's up against." The commander considered this, then nodded. "Very well. Standard sparring rules. No lethal force." A circle formed around Grunt and Chun. The massive Thorian warrior towered over the human, his rock-like skin gleaming under the arena lights. Chun set down his rifle and removed his tactical vest, standing in simple combat fatigues. "I'll try not to break you too badly," Grunt said, assuming a fighting stance that had won him championships across 3-star systems. Chun simply nodded and settled into a ready position, his stance low and balanced. Grunt attacked first, moving with surprising speed for his size. His massive fist swung down like a sledgehammer, aimed at crushing the human with a single blow. The watching soldiers expected to see Chun flattened instantly. Instead, Chun stepped smoothly to the side, using Grunt's momentum against him. As the massive fist passed by, Chun struck with surgical precision at what he had identified as a nerve cluster in Grunt's arm. The Thorian bellowed in surprise as his arm went temporarily numb. The arena fell silent, except for Grunt's roar of anger. He spun, sweeping his other arm in a horizontal arc that could shatter stone. Again, Chun wasn't there, having ducked under the swing and delivered another precise strike to Grunt's knee joint. The Thorian warrior stumbled, his balance compromised. In that moment of vulnerability, Chun moved. Using leverage and timing rather than brute force, he managed to trip the massive alien, sending Grunt crashing to the floor with an impact that shook the arena. Before Grunt could recover, Chun had already stepped back, returning to his ready stance as if nothing had happened. The watching soldiers stared in shock. Zephyr's feathers stood on end. Tide's bioluminescent patterns flickered in confusion. Node's crystalline form pulsed rapidly as it tried to process what had just occurred. Grunt slowly got to his feet, rage burning in his 6 eyes. "Lucky hit," he growled, though the slight limp in his movement suggested otherwise. "Would you like to continue, sir?" Chun asked politely. Grunt charged again, this time holding nothing back. His species was known for their berserker rages, where pain only fueled their strength. He swung wildly, each blow capable of pulverizing concrete. Chun moved like water, flowing around each attack. Where Grunt relied on power, Chun used efficiency. Where Grunt attacked with rage, Chun responded with calm precision. The human struck only when necessary, targeting joints, nerve clusters, and pressure points with an anatomical knowledge that shouldn't have been possible. Within minutes, Grunt was on the ground again, his massive form trembling from the accumulated damage to his nervous system. He tried to rise, but found his muscles refusing to respond properly. Chen knelt beside him. "The strike points will wear off in about 10 minutes, sir. No permanent damage." The arena was dead silent. Commander Vextar's mandibles hung open in surprise. Finally, he found his voice. How did you know where to strike?" "Thorian anatomy is classified information." Chun stood, helping the recovering Grunt to his feet. "With respect, sir, it's not that classified. And humans are very good at pattern recognition. Your species might be built differently, but physics and biology follow similar rules. Leverage points, nerve clusters, joint weaknesses, they're usually in predictable locations once you understand the basic structure." "But the strength difference," Zephyr protested. "Grunt could bench press a ground vehicle." "Strength is less important than knowing how to apply it, ma'am," Chen replied. "A lever and fulcrum can move tremendous weight with minimal force." As Grunt's motor control returned, he looked at Chun with something approaching respect. "You fight like no human in our databases." "Your databases probably focus on conventional military forces," Chen said. "Navy SEALs train differently. We're not built to overpower enemies. We're built to win regardless of the odds." Commander Vextar cleared his throat. "Well, this has been educational. But the sparring match proves nothing. The combat trials test more than hand-to-hand combat. There's marksmanship, tactical planning, survival skills, infiltration." "Understand, sir," Chun said, retrieving his rifle and gear. "I'm ready when you are." As the soldiers prepared for the trials, the atmosphere had changed. The dismissive amusement was gone, replaced by uncertainty and a grudging curiosity. They had assumed humans were weak because they lacked natural weapons, armor, or enhanced senses. But Chun had demonstrated something they hadn't considered, that evolution on a hostile world without such advantages had forced humans to develop something potentially more dangerous: intelligence applied to warfare. The first trial was marksmanship. The arena transformed into a complex shooting range with targets at various distances, some moving, some partially concealed. Environmental conditions shifted randomly: wind, rain, varying gravity fields. The Alliance soldiers went first, each using their species' preferred weapons. Zephyr's keen eyesight allowed her to hit targets others couldn't even see. Tide's pressure cannons were devastatingly accurate at medium range. Node's energy weapons never missed, its computer brain calculating trajectories perfectly. Then it was Chen's turn. He carried what looked like an antique, a chemical projectile rifle with an optical scope. The other soldiers smirked at the primitive weapon. Chun took his position and waited. The first target appeared at 500 meters, an easy shot for any Alliance sniper. Chun didn't fire immediately. He waited, reading the wind patterns, feeling the subtle changes in gravity. When he finally squeezed the trigger, the bullet hit dead center. The next target was at 1,000 meters, partially obscured by simulated foliage. Chun adjusted his scope, made calculations in his head that Node would have needed processors for, and fired. Another perfect hit. As the trial progressed, the targets became increasingly difficult. Moving targets, multiple targets, targets that appeared for only fractions of a second. Chun never missed. His rifle might have been primitive, but his skill was anything but. The final challenge was considered impossible. A target at 2,500 meters in shifting wind conditions, visible for only 2 seconds. Even Zephyr, with her enhanced vision, had missed it. Node's energy weapons couldn't maintain accuracy at that range with the environmental interference. Chun went perfectly still. His breathing slowed to almost nothing. His heart rate dropped to levels that would concern most medical professionals. In that moment of absolute calm, he became one with his weapon, factoring in wind speed, gravity, the Coriolis effect from the station's rotation, even the minute tremors in the deck plating. He fired once. The target registered a hit dead center. The range officer, a veteran Krellian who had overseen thousands of trials, double-checked his instruments. That's a perfect score. No one has ever achieved a perfect score on the advanced marksmanship trial. Chun safed his weapon and stood. The fundamentals are the same regardless of the weapon, sir. Breathe, aim, squeeze. But the calculations, Node interjected, its form flickering with agitation. The variables involved at that range. Humans have been making those calculations for centuries, Chun said. Long before we had computers to help us. We just had to get very good at doing them in our heads. The next trial was survival. The arena became a hostile environment. A frozen wasteland with temperatures that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. The gravity was set to 1.5 times Earth normal. The atmosphere was thin, and predatory creatures roamed the simulated terrain. The Alliance soldiers relied on their natural advantages. Grunt's thick skin provided protection from a cold. Zephyr's feathers insulated her perfectly. Tide simply lowered his metabolism to near hibernation levels. Node was unaffected by biological concerns. Chun had none of these advantages. What he had was preparation and ingenuity. Within minutes, he had constructed a shelter using the ice itself, creating an insulated space that trapped his body heat. He identified which of the simulated plants were combustible despite the moisture content, starting a fire using chemical reactions from his gear. When the predators came, biomechanical constructs designed to test combat readiness in harsh conditions. Chun didn't fight them directly. Instead, he studied their behavior, learned their patterns, and then used the environment against them. Pit traps, avalanches, even turning the creatures against each other. By the time the survival trial ended, Chun had not only survived but thrived. He had mapped the entire area, identified all resources, and established multiple secure positions. The trial administrators noted that he had actually gained weight during the exercise by efficiently hunting and preparing the local fauna. The infiltration trial was where many expected Chun to finally fail. The objective was to penetrate a heavily guarded facility and retrieve data without being detected. The facility was protected by the most advanced sensors in the galaxy, guards from multiple species, and adaptive AI security systems. The Alliance soldiers each had their methods. Zephyr relied on her speed, moving too fast for most sensors to track. Tide compressed his form to slip through impossibly small spaces. Node attempted to hack the security systems directly. Chun disappeared entirely. The observers watched their monitors in confusion. One moment Chun was at the starting point, the next he was simply gone. No sensors detected him, no alarms were triggered. Even the pressure plates and thermal imaging showed nothing. Where is he? Commander Vextar demanded, cycling through every available surveillance feed. It wasn't until Chun appeared inside the objective room, data core in hand, that anyone realized what had happened. He had spent the previous trials not just competing, but observing, learning the blind spots in the sensor grid, the patterns of the guards, the rhythm of the security systems. He had moved slowly, patiently, using techniques developed over decades of real-world operations. Urban camouflage, sensor spoofing using simple reflective materials, even controlling his body temperature and electromagnetic signature through meditation techniques. Impossible, Node stated flatly. I monitored all sensor feeds. You were never detected. That's the point of infiltration, sir, Chun replied. The best way to avoid detection is to never give them anything to detect. The final trial was tactical planning. Each participant was given command of a simulated military force and tasked with achieving objectives against overwhelming odds. It was a test of leadership, strategy, and adaptability. The Alliance soldiers approached it with their species' traditional doctrines. Grunt favored overwhelming force and frontal assaults. Zephyr used hit-and-run tactics. Tide employed fluid, adaptable strategies. Node calculated optimal strategies based on statistical models. Chun's approach was different. He spent the first portion of his time not attacking, but gathering intelligence. He studied his virtual enemies' patterns, identified their supply lines, analyzed their command structure. When he finally acted, it wasn't with massive battles, but with precision strikes. He used psychological warfare, spreading disinformation that caused enemy units to mistrust each other. He employed economic warfare, disrupting supply chains rather than destroying units directly. He turned the enemy's strength against them, using their own rigid command structure to predict their responses. Most surprisingly, he avoided casualties wherever possible, even simulated enemy casualties. When questioned about this seemingly soft approach, Chen's response was telling. Dead enemies can't surrender, sir. They can't provide intelligence. They can't spread fear among their comrades. And they create martyrs. A defeated enemy who lives to tell about it is worth 10 who die heroically. By the end of the simulation, Chun had achieved total victory with minimal losses, having turned half the enemy force to his side through a combination of psychological operations, strategic mercy, and demonstration of superior tactics. As the trials concluded, the atmosphere among the Alliance soldiers had completely transformed. The dismissive superiority was gone, replaced by a mixture of respect, curiosity, and perhaps a touch of fear. They gathered in the debriefing room, where Commander Vextar displayed the final scores. Chen had not only passed every trial, but had set new records in most of them. The human who they had dismissed as weak and primitive had systematically demonstrated superiority in every aspect of warfare that truly mattered. I don't understand, Grunt said, his earlier hostility replaced by genuine confusion. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced senses. How are you so effective? Chen considered the question carefully. On Earth, humans aren't the strongest, fastest, or toughest species. We don't have claws or fangs or venom. For millions of years, we were prey animals. But we survived. We survived by being smarter, more adaptable, more creative than our predators. He paused, looking at each of the Alliance soldiers. You all evolved with natural advantages that made you apex predators on your worlds. But humans? We had to become apex predators through intelligence and tool use. We had to outthink every threat because we couldn't outfight them. But surely now, with your technology, Tide began. Technology is just an extension of that same principle, Chen interrupted gently. Every human advancement comes from the same source. The need to overcome our physical limitations through intelligence. We couldn't fly, so we built aircraft. We couldn't see in the dark, so we developed night vision. We couldn't calculate fast enough, so we created computers. Node's crystalline form pulsed thoughtfully. You're saying your perceived weakness is actually your strength? I'm saying that evolution under extreme pressure without natural advantages forced us to develop the most dangerous adaptation of all, problem-solving intelligence applied to survival. Every human soldier carries millions of years of evolutionary pressure that taught us one crucial lesson. When you can't win through strength, you win through strategy. Zephyr ruffled her feathers uncomfortably. The Alliance has always judged species by their physical capabilities, which is a logical approach when those capabilities are obvious, Chun agreed. But it might cause you to overlook less obvious threats. Or allies. Commander Vextar had been silent throughout the discussion, but now he spoke. These trials were meant to assess whether humans could serve in support roles within the Alliance military. I think it's clear that assessment was flawed. He turned to Chun. Your performance suggests humans will be better suited to specialist roles. Intelligence, infiltration, strategic planning, asymmetric warfare. Chun smiled slightly. With respect, sir, you're still thinking too small. The room fell silent at this bold statement. Vextar's antennae twitched. Explain. You're thinking of humans as just another species to plug into existing Alliance military doctrine. But human warfare has always been about innovation, adaptation, and finding unexpected solutions. We don't just want to fill roles in your military. We want to revolutionize how the Alliance thinks about warfare itself. Revolution is a strong word, Grunt said, though without his earlier hostility. Is it? Chun countered. How many alliance battles are still fought the way they were 1,000 years ago? How many strategies remain unchanged because they've always worked? Humans have developed entirely new forms of warfare every few decades out of necessity. Economic warfare, cyber warfare, information warfare, asymmetric warfare, concepts that might be foreign to species who've always relied on conventional strength. He stood, moving to the holographic display. May I? At Vextar's nod, Chen pulled up a star map showing recent alliance conflicts. Take the Skorax Rebellion. The alliance has been fighting them for 3 years with conventional forces. But look at their supply lines, their recruitment centers, their propaganda networks. A small team of human specialists could cripple their entire operation within months without firing a shot. The Alliance soldiers leaned forward, suddenly, seeing the familiar conflict in a new light. Chun continued, highlighting vulnerability after vulnerability that conventional military thinking had overlooked. Or the Nexus Prime dispute, he continued. 2 Alliance members ready to go to war over mineral rights. But what if, instead of choosing sides or deploying peacekeepers, you restructure the economic incentives to make cooperation more profitable than conflict? That's not military strategy, Note observed. That's war by other means, Chun finished. Humans learned long ago that the best victory is the one that prevents the battle from ever happening. The supreme excellence is not to win 100 battles, but to defeat the enemy without fighting. He turned back to the group. Humans can offer the Alliance something more valuable than just another species of soldier. We can offer 2 million years of evolutionary experience in turning weakness into strength, in finding victory through unconventional means, in surviving and thriving despite every disadvantage. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Commander Vextar spoke. You've given us much to think about, Chief Petty Officer Chun. I'll be recommending to the Alliance Council that human integration into our forces be fast-tracked, with particular emphasis on strategic planning and special operations roles. Thank you, sir, Chun said. But I have one more demonstration, if you're willing. Vextar's mandibles clicked curiously. Oh, you've seen what one human special operator can do. But SEALs don't typically work alone. I'd like to introduce you to my team. The arena doors opened, and 6 more humans entered, each moving with the same quiet confidence as Chun. They were different sizes, different ethnicities, but they all shared that same alert readiness, that same economical movement that spoke of lethal capability. 7 humans? Grunt said, what can 7 humans do that one cannot? Chun smiled, and for the first time there was something predatory in it. Would you like to find out? The demonstration that followed would become legendary in Alliance military history. 7 humans, working in perfect synchronization, systematically defeated a full company of Alliance elite troops in simulated combat. They used tactics the Alliance had never seen. Coordinated strikes from multiple angles, psychological operations that caused confusion in enemy ranks, adaptive strategies that changed faster than their opponents could respond. But more than their tactical excellence, what impressed the observers was their cohesion. They moved as one organism, each member knowing exactly where the others were and what they would do. They communicated with subtle gestures, anticipated each other's needs, and covered each other's weaknesses with an efficiency that seemed almost telepathic. When it was over, with the enemy forces neutralized and objectives secured, the 7 humans stood together, not even breathing hard. The Alliance soldiers watching were silent, processing what they had witnessed. Ow, was all Zephyr could manage. Trust, Chin said simply. We trust each other absolutely. Each of us would die for the others without hesitation. That kind of bond, forged in training and combat, makes us more than the sum of our parts. He looked at the assembled Alliance soldiers. This is what humans bring to the Alliance. Not just individual skill, but the ability to forge teams that multiply that skill exponentially. We call it force multiplication, making a small unit capable of achieving objectives that should require forces 10 times their size. Commander Vextar was already composing his report in his mind. The Alliance had badly underestimated humanity. They had judged them by their physical limitations without understanding that those very limitations had forged them into something far more dangerous, a species that had turned warfare into a science and an art form. "There's one more thing," Chen added. "Everything you've seen today, this is just our conventional special forces. Wait until you meet our cyber warfare specialists, our psychological operations teams, our economic warfare divisions. Humans have been perfecting the art of conflict for our entire existence. We're very, very good at it." The implications hung in the air. The Alliance had thought they were evaluating a weak species for support roles. Instead, they had discovered a species that could revolutionize their entire approach to warfare. As the debriefing concluded and the soldiers dispersed, Grunt approached Chun. The massive Thorian warrior extended one rocky hand. "I owe you an apology. I judge your species by appearance rather than capability. It won't happen again." Chun shook the offered hand. "No apology necessary, sir. Underestimating humans is a mistake most species only make once." Grunt laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Indeed. I look forward to serving alongside your kind. I think the galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place." As the humans departed, Commander Vextar remained behind with his staff, reviewing the trial footage. Every viewing revealed new subtleties, new techniques, new implications. The humans had hidden their true capabilities so well that even now, he suspected they had shown only a fraction of what they could do. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "what do you think this means for the Alliance?" Vextar was quiet for a moment. "I think," he said finally, "that we've just gained either our greatest ally or our most dangerous rival. Possibly both." He turned to the communications console. "Open a priority channel to Alliance Command. They need to see this immediately, and begin preparing new training protocols. If we're going to work with humans, we need to understand how they think." His aide hesitated. "All of our training programs, sir?" "All of them," Vextar confirmed. "Everything from basic tactics to strategic doctrine. The humans have shown us that our entire approach to warfare may be outdated. We can either adapt or risk being left behind." As the message was transmitted, Vextar allowed himself a moment of contemplation. The galaxy had always been divided between predators and prey, between the strong and the weak. But the humans had introduced a third category, those who were weak but had become strong through intelligence and determination. It was, he realized, perhaps the most dangerous category of all. The news of the human demonstration spread through the Alliance military like wildfire. Reactions ranged from disbelief to alarm to excitement. Some species called for restrictions on human military participation, fearing they would upset the balance of power. Others pushed for immediate integration, wanted to learn these new techniques. But all agreed on one thing. The arrival of humanity on the galactic stage had changed everything. The weak, fragile species from a backwater planet had proven to be anything but. They were predators of a different sort. Predators who hunted with minds instead of claws, with strategy instead of strength. And in the vast, dangerous galaxy, that might make them the most formidable predators of all. The weeks following Chen's demonstration saw a fundamental shift in how the Galactic Alliance viewed humanity. Military academies across 100 worlds scrambled to analyze the footage. Strategists wrote lengthy dissertations on human tactical innovation, and special forces units began incorporating human-inspired techniques into their training regiments. But the real test was yet to come. Deep in the Sagittarius Arm, on a planet designated as Kepler 442b by human astronomers, a crisis was brewing. The world, known locally as Verdania, had been a peaceful agricultural colony for 3 centuries. Its inhabitants, a gentle species called the melons, had evolved from herbivorous herd animals and retained their ancestral pacifist nature. They grew the exotic foodstuffs that fed half the Alliance and had never needed more than a token peacekeeping force. That changed when the Krithans arrived. The Krithans were not members of the Alliance. They were raiders, Pirates, a warrior culture that lived by pillaging weaker civilizations. Their technology was stolen. Their ships were cobbled together from the wreckage of their victims. But their ferocity was legendary. They descended on worlds like locusts, taking what they wanted and leaving devastation in their wake. The Alliance had tried to stop them many times, but the Crithans were cunning. They struck at weak points, vanished into the vast emptiness between stars, and never stayed in one place long enough to be cornered. They were a problem that conventional military doctrine had failed to solve. Now, they had taken Verdania. In the Alliance Strategic Command Center on Centauri Station, the military leadership gathered around a holographic display of the situation. The Crithans had landed 3 hive ships on the planet's main continent, each carrying thousands of warriors. They had overwhelmed the small peacekeeping force in hours and were now systematically looting the agricultural centers. The situation is critical, Admiral Thursdayvar of the Altarian fleet reported, her serpentine form coiled anxiously. The Crithans have taken 30,000 Melon civilians hostage. They're using them as living shields around their landing sites. General Kor of the Procyon Guard slammed an armored fist on the table. We should assault immediately. Every moment we delay, more Melons die. And if we assault, they all die, Thursdayvar countered. The Crithans will execute the hostages the moment our ships enter orbit. It's their standard tactic. Then, what do you suggest? Kor demanded. Let them strip the planet bare? The famine that would kill millions across the Alliance. The argument continued, growing more heated. Some advocated for negotiation, though everyone knew the Crithans never honored agreements. Others pushed for a blockade, hoping to starve them out, but that would take months the Melons didn't have. A few even suggested writing off the planet entirely, sacrificing Verdania to protect other worlds. It was Commander Vextar who raised a new possibility. What about the humans? The room fell silent. The integration of human forces was still in its early stages. Only a handful of human units had been attached to Alliance forces, mostly in advisory roles. Using them in a real combat situation, especially one this critical, was a massive risk. The humans have had space travel for barely 50 years, General Kor protested. You want to trust them with a situation this delicate? The conventional approaches have all failed, Vextar pointed out. The humans think differently. Perhaps that's exactly what we need. Admiral Thursdayvar considered this. Where is the nearest human unit? The destroyer USS Coronado is stationed at Proxima Station, an aide reported. They have a SEAL team aboard. Team 4, led by Chief Petty Officer Chun. Several of the commanders who had witnessed Chen's demonstration perked up at this. Vextar leaned forward. The same team that revolutionized our training protocols? The same, sir. Thursdayvar made a decision. Bring them in. Let's at least hear what they propose. 3 hours later, Chun and his team stood before the Alliance command staff. The humans looked almost comically small next to the various alien commanders, but there was nothing comical about their bearing. They studied the tactical display with intense focus, occasionally exchanging quiet comments. What's your assessment, Chief? Thursdayvar asked. Chun was quiet for a moment longer, then spoke. The Crithans are bullies. They attack the weak because it's easy. They take hostages because it's worked before. But every bully has the same weakness. Which is? Kor asked skeptically. They're not prepared for someone who refuses to play by their rules, Chun said. He moved to the display, highlighting various elements. Look at their deployment. 3 hive ships spread out for maximum coverage. Hostages clustered around each ship. Anti-orbital weapons positioned to fire on any approaching fleet. It's textbook raider tactics. Exactly, Kor said. And it's effective. How do we counter it without massive casualties? Chun smiled slightly. By not doing what they expect. They're prepared for an orbital assault or a ground invasion. They're not prepared for infiltration. He pulled up a topographical map of the area. My team can insert here, 50 kilometers from the nearest hive ship. We move in under cover of darkness, infiltrate their perimeter, and begin operations. 7 humans against 3,000 Crithans? Someone scoffed. That's suicide. Not if we're smart about it, Chun countered. We don't need to defeat them in open combat. We need to create chaos, confusion, and doubt. Make them question their own tactics. Force them to make mistakes. He began outlining a plan that was unlike anything the Alliance commanders had seen. It didn't rely on overwhelming force or superior technology. Instead, it was built on misdirection, psychological warfare, and precision strikes at critical vulnerabilities. The Krithans are holding hostages in 3 locations, Chen explained. That divides their forces and their attention. They expect us to care about the hostages, to let that limit our options. But what if we make them think we don't care? What if we make them believe we're willing to be just as ruthless as they are? Tuvar scales fifte duniasidu. The Alliance doesn't sacrifice innocence. We won't, Chen assured her. But they don't know that. The Krithans have never fought humans before. They don't know our rules of engagement. We can use that uncertainty. He detailed the next phase. While they're focused on the possibility of a ruthless assault, we'll be inside their perimeter. My team specializes in something we call invisible warfare. We'll turn their own systems against them, create internal conflicts, make them doubt their own people. How? Vextar asked, genuinely curious. Humans have been practicing deception and warfare for millennia, Chen said. We'll use false communications to make different Krithan groups think they're being betrayed by each other. We'll sabotage equipment in ways that look like negligence or betrayal. We'll create evidence of plots and conspiracies. Within days, they'll be more focused on internal threats than external ones. The plan continued to unfold, each element building on the last. It was complex, requiring precise timing and flawless execution, but it addressed every concern the commanders had raised. Most importantly, it offered the possibility of victory without massive casualties. And if it fails? Core pressed. If you're discovered and killed, then you proceed with conventional tactics, and we've lost 7 lives instead of thousands, Chen said simply. But it won't fail. The confidence in his voice was not arrogance, but the calm certainty of someone who had calculated all the variables and found them acceptable. After hours of debate, Admiral Thursdayvar made the decision. You have authorization to proceed, Chief. May the void protect you. Thank you, ma'am, Chen said. We'll need a few things from your intelligence division, and I'd like to review all available data on Krithan psychology and social structures. Anything you need, Thursdayvar confirmed. As the humans prepared to depart, General Kor pulled Chen aside. I still think this is madness, but I hope you prove me wrong. Those civilians don't deserve what's happening to them. No one ever does, sir, Chen replied. That's why we do what we do. 48 hours later, a small stealth craft deposited SEAL Team 4 on the night side of Verdania. The 7 humans moved across the alien landscape like ghosts, their advanced gear allowing them to blend seamlessly with their surroundings. They covered the 50 kilometers to the Krithan perimeter in 6 hours, moving with a patience that would have frustrated many Alliance soldiers used to direct action. The Krithan encampment was a sprawling complex of prefabricated structures and defensive positions. Through their scopes, the SEALs could see Melon civilians huddled in open-air pens, surrounded by armed guards. The hive ship loomed above it all, a grotesque amalgamation of stolen technology and organic architecture. Positions, Chun whispered into his comm unit. The team dispersed, each member moving to a predetermined location. They had studied the camp layout for hours, identifying key targets and vulnerabilities. Now it was time to execute. Petty Officer Rodriguez, the team's electronic specialist, found what he was looking for first, a communications relay poorly shielded from intrusion. Working with tools that looked primitive compared to Alliance standard gear, but were perfectly suited for the task, he gained access to the Krithan communication network. I'm in, he reported. Beginning Phase 1. Phase 1 was misinformation. Rodriguez began intercepting and altering communications between Krithan units. A supply request from the northern perimeter became a suspicious inquiry about missing weapons. A routine status report was modified to include subtle accusations of skimming from the loot. The changes were minor, almost unnoticeable, but they planted seeds of doubt. Meanwhile, Petty Officer Kim had infiltrated the supply depot. Instead of destroying supplies, which would have been discovered immediately, she contaminated them in subtle ways. Food supplies were tainted with compounds that would cause mild illness. Not enough to incapacitate, but enough to create discomfort and suspicion about poisoning. She also left evidence. A Crithan data pad, supposedly dropped by accident, containing what appeared to be plans for one faction to claim a larger share of the plunder. The plans were fake, of course, but they were crafted with enough authentic detail to be believable. Petty Officer Johnson, the team's sniper, had positioned himself with a clear view of the command structure. But he wasn't there to kill, not yet. Instead, he was observing, learning the dynamics between the Crithan leaders, identifying rivalries, and tensions that could be exploited. Got eyes on their command staff, he reported. 3 subcommanders, and they don't look happy with each other. This was expected. The Crithans were not a unified species, but a collection of clans held together by mutual benefit and fear of their warlord. That fragile alliance was about to be tested. As night deepened, the SEALs continued their work. Chun and the others created small disruptions. A sentry who swore he saw movement where there was none, strange sounds that kept guards on edge, equipment that malfunctioned at critical moments. Each incident was minor, but together they created an atmosphere of unease. By dawn, the first arguments had broken out in the Crithan camp. A squad leader accused another of stealing from their rations. A technical team blamed sabotage for equipment failures. The modified communications had done their job, creating confusion about orders and intentions. The Crithan commander, a massive brute named Gorik, tried to maintain order through intimidation. But even he was affected by the growing paranoia. Who could he trust? Which of his subordinates might be plotting against him? The SEALs watched from their hidden positions as the camp's efficiency degraded. Guards were pulled from the perimeter to investigate internal disputes. Patrols became erratic as soldiers watched each other as much as they watched for external threats. Phase 2, Chin ordered. This was the escalation. Rodriguez transmitted a message that appeared to come from one of the subcommanders, suggesting a meeting to discuss dealing with Gorik. The message was intercepted by Gorik's loyalists, as intended. The resulting confrontation was brutal. Gorik executed the subcommander publicly, which had the effect of terrifying some Crithans while angering others who had been loyal to the executed leader. The camp divided into factions, each suspicious of the others. Kim used the chaos to access the hostage pens. She didn't try to free the melons. That would have exposed the operation. Instead, she left supplies and medicine along with messages of hope written in the Melon language. The civilians needed to know they weren't abandoned, that help was working to free them. Johnson identified his moment. During a particularly heated argument between Crithan factions, he took a single shot, not at a leader that would have united them against an external threat. Instead, he shot a lieutenant who was reaching for his weapon, making it appear he had been killed by the opposing faction. The camp erupted. Weapons were drawn, accusations flew, and within minutes a full-scale internal conflict had begun. Crithans fought Crithans while the human team watched from the shadows, occasionally adding fuel to the fire with well-placed shots or explosions that each side blamed on the other. By the third day, the Crithan force was in complete disarray. Gorik maintained control of only his most loyal followers, perhaps a third of his original force. The others had either fled, been killed in the infighting, or formed their own factions. The careful organization that made them dangerous was gone. Phase 3, Chen announced. This was the most dangerous part. With the Crithans weakened and divided, it was time to free the hostages. But it had to be done in a way that prevented retaliation. The team moved under cover of another internal conflict they had orchestrated. While Crithans fought each other, the SEALs breached the hostage pens. They worked quickly, efficiently, guiding the terrified Melons to escape routes they had mapped days earlier. Some Crithans noticed the escaping prisoners and tried to stop them. These were the ones Johnson had been waiting for. His rifle spoke with deadly precision, each shot perfectly placed. In the chaos, most Crithans assumed the shots came from their rivals, not an external sniper. Rodriguez had saved his best trick for last. He transmitted a message on all Crithan channels, using Gord's command codes that he had painstakingly decoded. The message was simple. The Alliance fleet is in orbit. Surrender or be destroyed. There was no fleet, of course, but the Crithans, already paranoid and demoralized, didn't know that. They looked to their sensors, which Rodriguez had subtly miscalibrated to show false returns. They saw what they expected to see, a massive Alliance armada ready to rain destruction upon them. Some Crithans fled immediately, racing for their ships. Others turned on Gorak, blaming him for leading them into a trap. The warlord found himself fighting not an external enemy, but his own people, the very situation he had always used against others. As the sun rose on the fourth day, the Crithan occupation of Verdania was effectively over. Most of their forces had fled or killed each other. The hostages were free, evacuated to safety by the local population who had been alerted by the SEALs. Gorak himself was dead, killed by his own lieutenants who thought he had betrayed them. SEAL Team 4 exfiltrated as quietly as they had arrived, leaving behind a Crithan force so thoroughly demoralized and divided that they would never again pose a unified threat. The Alliance fleet did arrive 2 days later to find the crisis already resolved. Admiral Thursday Var personally interviewed the freed hostages, trying to understand what had happened. The stories were confused, fragmented, but a picture emerged of chaos in the Crithan ranks, of rescuers who moved like shadows, of hope delivered in the darkest moments. At the debrief on Centauri Station, Chun and his team stood before the assembled Alliance command. The room was silent as they presented their after-action report, detailing each phase of the operation with clinical precision. Casualties? Admiral Thursday Var asked when they finished. 37 Melons died during the initial invasion, Chun reported. None after we began operations. No hayan casualties. Enemy casualties estimated at 60%, mostly from internal conflict. 60%. General Corps was astounded. You eliminated over half their force without direct engagement. We eliminated their cohesion, Chun corrected. Their force eliminated itself. We just provided the catalyst. Commander Vextar leaned forward. The psychological operations, the way you turn them against each other, I've never seen anything like it. It's an old human tactic, Chun explained. Sun Tzu wrote about it over 2,000 years ago. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. The Crithans were predators, but they were also paranoid and greedy. We just amplified those existing traits until they consumed themselves. But the precision required, Thursday Var said, her tone admiring. One mistake, and the entire operation fails. That's what we trained for, ma'am, Chun said simply. To operate in the space between success and failure, where the margin for error doesn't exist. The implications of the operation rippled through Alliance military thinking. Here was a new form of warfare, one that didn't rely on superior firepower or technology, but on understanding and exploiting the enemy's psychology. It was subtle, sophisticated, and devastatingly effective. Over the following weeks, more human special operations units were requested by Alliance commands across the galaxy. The initial skepticism about human physical weakness had been replaced by a healthy respect for their intellectual approach to warfare. But it was Kim who perhaps summed it up best during a training session with Alliance Special Forces candidates. You keep asking how we do it, she told them. How physically inferior humans can defeat superior enemies. You're asking the wrong question. The question isn't how we defeat them despite being weaker. The question is how we turn their strength into weakness. She pulled up footage from Verdania. The Crithans were strong, so they were arrogant. They were unified by greed, so they were susceptible to suspicion about shares. They ruled through fear, so they were vulnerable to paranoia. Every strength, when taken to extreme, becomes a vulnerability. Humans learn this because we had to. When you can't match strength with strength, you learn to make strength irrelevant. The Alliance was beginning to understand. Humans weren't just another species to be integrated into existing military structures. They were a catalyst for evolution in military thinking itself. Reports came in from across Alliance space. Human advisors were revolutionizing everything from logistics to strategic planning. They introduced concepts like hearts and minds campaigns that prevented rebellions before they started. They developed economic warfare strategies that made conflict unprofitable. They created information operations that countered enemy propaganda before it could take root. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the Alliance viewed strength itself. For millennia, they had measured military might in terms of firepower, physical prowess, and technological advancement. The humans showed them that true strength might lie elsewhere, in adaptability, creativity, and the ability to turn any situation to advantage. General Core, who had been among the most skeptical, became one of the strongest advocates for human integration. I spent my career believing that strength meant being able to destroy your enemies, he said at a strategic planning conference. The humans taught me that true strength means not needing to. The Verdania operation became a case study in Alliance military academies. But the humans were quick to point out that it wasn't a template to be copied blindly. Every situation is unique, Chun told a class of Alliance officers. What worked on Verdania might fail catastrophically elsewhere. The key is not to memorize tactics, but to understand principles. Read your enemy. Find their psychological pressure points. Create situations where they defeat themselves. Make victory inevitable before the first shot is fired. One student, a young Altarian, asked, "But what if the enemy has no weaknesses?" Chun smiled. Everyone has weaknesses. The Krithans thought they had none, and that belief was their greatest weakness of all. Perfection is an illusion. Find a flaw, however small, and apply pressure. Even a mightiest dam can be brought down by water finding a single crack. As human integration continued, the changes in Alliance military effectiveness were remarkable. Piracy dropped by 60% as human-advised task forces anticipated and counter-raider tactics. Border disputes were resolved through economic and diplomatic pressure rather than military standoffs. Rebellions were prevented through early intervention and addressing of grievances. But it wasn't just about preventing conflict. When violence was necessary, Human Alliance joint operations showed a new level of effectiveness. The combination of Alliance physical capabilities with human tactical innovation proved nearly unstoppable. One operation in particular demonstrated this synergy. The planet Nexus 7 had been occupied by an extremist faction that had developed a weaponized plague, threatening to release it unless their demands were met. Traditional military options risked triggering the very catastrophe they were trying to prevent. A joint team was assembled. Alliance soldiers provided the physical capabilities needed to survive in Nexus VII's harsh environment, while human operators provided the tactical planning. The operation was a masterpiece of coordination. Alliance troops used their natural advantages to create diversions and breach defenses, while human operators infiltrated the bioweapon facility and neutralized the threat. The extremists never knew what hit them. One moment they were in control, the next their weapons were neutralized, their leadership captured, and their organization dismantled. No plague was released, no civilians were harmed, and the threat was eliminated permanently. This is the future, Admiral Thursdayvar declared at the operation debrief. Not humans or Alliance, but humans and Alliance. Together, we're more than the sum of our parts. Shin nodded in agreement. Humans bring the mind, the Alliance brings the muscle. It's a good partnership. But perhaps the most profound change was in how the Alliance viewed warfare itself. For so long, they had seen it as a necessary evil, a failure of diplomacy, a regression to primitive impulses. The humans showed them it could be something more, a precise tool to be used sparingly, but effectively a scalpel rather than a club. War is too important to be left to warriors, Chun told a gathering of Alliance leaders. It requires artists, scientists, philosophers. It requires understanding not just how to fight, but when to fight, and more importantly, when not to fight. He pulled up a chart showing Alliance conflict statistics since human integration began. The numbers were striking: fewer wars, shorter conflicts, dramatically reduced casualties, and, most remarkably, a significant increase in lasting peace agreements. This isn't because humans are better at war, Chen explained. It's because we're better at avoiding unnecessary wars and ending necessary ones quickly. Every human soldier is taught that the ultimate goal is not victory, but peace. Victory is just the means to that end. The room was quiet, absorbing this philosophy that was so different from traditional Alliance military thinking. For many species, warfare had been about dominance, about proving superiority. The humans were proposing something different: warfare as a tool of protection, used precisely and reluctantly. As months turned to years, human military philosophy became deeply integrated into Alliance doctrine. The changes were not always smooth. There were cultural clashes, misunderstandings, and occasional failures. But the overall trajectory was clear. The Alliance was becoming more effective, more ethical, and more successful in its role as galactic peacekeepers. The story of Verdania became legend, told and retold across 1,000 worlds. But Chun and his team remained humble about their role. "We didn't do anything special," Rodriguez insisted when interviewed for a military history project. "We just did what humans have always done, found a way to win without the advantages everyone else takes for granted." But others saw it differently. Commander Vextar, now promoted to Admiral and heading the new Joint Operations Command, had perhaps the best perspective. "The humans showed us that strength comes in many forms," he said. "For too long, we defined it purely in physical terms. But true strength is the ability to protect those who cannot protect themselves, to find victory without destruction, to turn enemies into allies." That's what the humans brought to the Alliance. Not just new tactics, but a new understanding of what it means to be strong. The galaxy had learned an important lesson: never underestimate humanity. They might be physically weak compared to other species, but they had survived and thrived on a hostile world through intelligence, adaptability, and sheer determination. Those qualities applied to warfare made them perhaps the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But more importantly, it made them the perfect guardians of peace. Because those who best understand war are often those most committed to preventing it. And humanity, with its long, bloody history, understood war better than most. As Chun had said in that first demonstration, humans had evolved not in spite of their weaknesses, but because of them. And in a galaxy full of predators, sometimes the most dangerous creature is the one that learned to be a predator through pure intelligence and will. The Alliance was stronger for having learned this lesson. And somewhere in the void, potential enemies took note and reconsidered their plans. Because now the Alliance had something more fearsome than any weapon or warrior. They had humans, and that changed everything. The transformation of the Galactic Alliance military continued over the following years, but not all changes were welcomed universally. Success bred resentment in some quarters, particularly among species who had traditionally dominated Alliance military hierarchies. The humans' rapid rise to influence created tensions that would soon be tested in ways no one anticipated. On the frozen world of Kalos Prime, a joint training exercise was underway. The planet's harsh conditions, temperatures that could freeze most species' blood in seconds, atmospheric pressure that crushed standard equipment, and predators that hunted in coordinated packs, made it perfect for extreme environment training. 3 teams were participating: a traditional Alliance unit led by the Procyon Guard, a human SEAL team, and a new experimental mixed unit combining both. Admiral Vextar observed from the orbital command station, watching feed from hundreds of sensors scattered across the training area. Beside him stood General Thorne, the newly appointed human liaison to Alliance High Command, and Marshal Krex, a Saurian warrior who had been vocally skeptical of human integration. "This exercise will prove nothing," Krex rumbled, his scales shifting to a darker shade that indicated displeasure. "Humans require so much technological assistance to survive here that they're more liability than asset." Thorne, a compact woman with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing, smiled slightly. "We'll see, Marshal. Adaptation through technology is still adaptation." On the planet's surface, the three teams had been given identical objectives: traverse 100 kilometers of hostile terrain, locate and secure a series of hidden supply caches, and reach the extraction point within 72 hours. It was a test of endurance, tactics, and adaptability. The Procyon Guard unit moved with impressive efficiency. Their natural armor protected them from the worst of the cold, and their enhanced strength let them power through obstacles. They took a direct route, relying on their physical superiority to overcome challenges through brute force. The human SEAL team, led by Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun, Marcus Chen's daughter, who had followed her father into the Special Forces, took a completely different approach. They spent the first 6 hours not moving toward the objective, but studying the environment. They analyzed weather patterns, tracked the local predators' movements, and identified natural shelters along their planned route. "Why aren't they moving?" Krex demanded, watching the human team's apparent inactivity. "Are they paralyzed by fear?" "They're thinking," Thorne replied calmly. "Something more soldiers should try." The mixed unit, meanwhile, was struggling with integration. The Alliance soldiers wanted to move quickly, while their human teammates insisted on more preparation. Arguments broke out over tactics, with neither side fully trusting the other's methods. They eventually compromised on a middle approach that satisfied no one. By the end of the first day, the Procyon Guard had covered 30 kilometers through sheer determination, though they had lost 2 members to predator attacks, and another to exposure when his armor seal cracked. The mixed unit had made 20 kilometers, but was intact, their progress slowed by internal conflicts. The human team had only advanced 15 kilometers, but had suffered no casualties and had successfully cached supplies along their route. "The humans are falling behind," Krex noted with satisfaction. "Are they?" Vextar mused, studying the tactical display more carefully. "Or are they playing a different game?" That night, as temperatures plummeted to levels that would kill an unprotected human in minutes, the differences in approach became more apparent. The Procyon Guard huddled together for warmth, posting guards who struggled to stay alert in the crushing cold. The mixed unit tried to combine methods, with partial success. The human team had excavated snow caves at predetermined locations, using the planet's own insulation against it. They had hot food from chemical heating packets and took turns sleeping in climate-controlled suits, while others stood watch using thermal sensors that turned the darkness into day. But the real surprise came when the humans acted on the intelligence they had gathered. Sarah Chun led a small team to investigate the predator packs they had been tracking. Instead of avoiding them or preparing defenses, the humans did something unprecedented. They established communication. "That's impossible," Krex stated flatly as they watched the feed. "Those creatures are non-sentient killing machines." But the humans had recognized something others missed. The predators hunted in sophisticated patterns that suggested high intelligence. Using a combination of acoustic signals and pheromone markers they had synthesized from captured specimens, the humans managed to establish rudimentary communication. Within hours, the predator pack was not hunting the humans, but actively avoiding them, even steering other prey away from their path. The humans had turned the planet's greatest threat into a neutral party, possibly even an inadvertent ally. "Ow," was all Krex could manage. "Humans have a long history of domesticating predators," Thorne explained. "We turned wolves into dogs, after all. These creatures aren't so different. Social hunters with pack hierarchies." We just needed to figure out how to speak their language. The second day brought new challenges. A massive storm system, unpredicted by Alliance meteorologists, but anticipated by the humans who had noticed subtle pressure changes, swept across the training area. The Procyon Guard was caught in the open, their direct route offering no shelter. They lost 3 more members to the whiteout conditions and were forced to dig in and wait, burning precious time. The mixed unit found partial shelter, but struggled with coordination. The human members wanted to use the storm as cover to move unseen, while the Alliance soldiers preferred to wait it out. The resulting compromise, partial movement and reduced visibility, led to 2 members becoming separated and having to be rescued, further delaying progress. The human team, having predicted the storm, had already positioned themselves in a series of connected cave systems they had mapped using ground-penetrating radar. They used the storm not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity, moving through the caves to cover distance while completely protected from the elements. They emerged 20 kilometers closer to their objective without having faced the storm at all. "They're cheating," Krex protested. "Using the caves isn't in the spirit of the exercise." "Neither is dying," Vextar observed dryly. "The objective is to reach the extraction point, not to do so in any particular way." But the real test came on the third day. The supply caches that were supposed to sustain the teams had been compromised, a twist in the exercise that simulated enemy action. The caches were either empty or booby-trapped, forcing teams to adapt. The Procyon Guard, already depleted and running low on supplies, faced a crisis. Their reliance on the caches meant they had no backup plan. They attempted to hunt local fauna, but found the creatures elusive and dangerous. One member suggested eating the vegetation, only to discover it was toxic to their physiology. The mixed unit fared better, with human members sharing knowledge of water purification and identifying potentially edible plants. But tensions rose as supplies dwindled, with some Alliance members suggesting the humans, who required less food due to their smaller size, should forfeit their rations. The human team, however, seemed almost unaffected. They had never relied entirely on the caches, instead supplementing them with resources they had identified and tested along the way. They had mapped water sources, identified edible plants and fungi, and even set traps for small prey. When they found the compromised caches, they simply nodded and moved on. They expected this, Vextar realized. They never trusted the caches to be there. Paranoid thinking, Krex dismissed. Practical thinking, Thorn corrected. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. Basic human military doctrine. As the teams approached the final phase, their conditions told the story. The Procyon Guard was down to 60% strength, with several members suffering from exposure and malnutrition. They had covered the distance through sheer determination, but at terrible cost. The mixed unit was at 80% strength, having lost members to accidents and one to hypothermia when human and Alliance cold weather protocols conflicted. The human team was at full strength. Not only had they suffered no casualties, but they appeared to be in better condition than when they started, having adapted completely to the environment. They had turned every obstacle into an advantage, every threat into an opportunity. But the exercise designers had one final test. The extraction point was guarded by simulated enemy force, training droids programmed with Alliance combat protocols. Teams would have to fight their way through or find another solution. The Procyon Guard, despite their depleted state, chose a frontal assault. It was brave, even heroic, but ultimately futile. The droids, fresh and operating at peak efficiency, cut them down one by one in the simulation. Within minutes, the entire team was listed as casualties. The mixed unit attempted a more coordinated approach, with humans providing tactical planning while Alliance soldiers executed. It worked better, but the lack of true integration showed. Command were misunderstood, timing was off, and eventually they too were overwhelmed, though not before destroying several droids. The human team never engaged the droids at all. What are they doing? Krex demanded as the humans seemed to circle the extraction zone without approaching. Sarah Chin's team had spent an hour observing the droids, analyzing their patterns, their sensor capabilities, their programmed responses. Then, they had implemented a plan that was either brilliant or insane. Using the techniques they had developed to communicate with the predators, they attracted a pack to the area. Then, through careful manipulation of scents and sounds, they triggered the pack's hunting instincts toward the droids. The mechanical guards, programmed to respond to humanoid threats, had no protocols for dealing with coordinated animal attacks. As the predators engaged the droids, creating chaos and confusion, the human team slipped through the perimeter unseen. They reached the extraction point without firing a shot, their mission completed with 0 casualties. The silence in the orbital command center was deafening. Even Thorn looked surprised by the unconventional solution. Finally, Krex spoke. They turned the planet itself into a weapon. No, Bextar Kerekti Sotfelli. They recognized that the planet was already a weapon. They just aimed it. The debrief was contentious. The Procyon Guard commander, nursing simulated wounds, accused the humans of cowardice for avoiding direct combat. The mixed unit leadership blamed their failure on incompatible doctrines. But the results were undeniable. Only the human team had completed the mission successfully. Sarah Chun stood before the assembled officers, her team behind her, still in their environment suits that looked primitive compared to Alliance-powered armor, but had proven perfectly adequate. Respectfully, sirs, she began, I think this exercise revealed the fundamental difference in our approaches. The Alliance military is built on the principle of overcoming obstacles through superior force or technology. Humans are built on the principle of avoiding obstacles entirely, or turning them to our advantage. She pulled up the tactical display. The Procyon Guard saw the environment as an enemy to be defeated. We saw it as a resource to be utilized. They saw the predators as threats to be destroyed. We saw them as potential tools. They saw the final droid force as a battle to be won. We saw it as a problem to be circumvented. Marshal Krex stood, his massive form towering over the human officer. You speak of cowardice as if it were wisdom. I speak of efficiency, Chen replied, unintimidated. What's the objective of any military operation? To achieve the goal with minimum casualties. We achieve the goal with 0 casualties. How is that cowardice? Because you never faced the enemy. Krex roared. The environment was the enemy, Chen countered. The predators were the enemy. The lack of supplies was the enemy. We faced them all, just not in the way you expected. As for the droids, why fight an enemy when you can make them irrelevant? General Thorn stepped forward. If I may, this exercise perfectly illustrates why human alliance integration is so vital. The Procyon Guard's bravery and strength are admirable, but bravery alone doesn't win wars. The human adaptability and unconventional thinking are powerful, but we lack the physical capabilities for many situations. Together, combining both approaches, we're unstoppable. She gestured to the mixed unit results. They failed not because the concept is flawed, but because we haven't yet learned to truly trust and understand each other. When we do, when alliance strength and human cunning work in harmony, no force in the galaxy will be able to stand against us. Admiral Vextar nuded slovely. The exercise has proven illuminating. I'm ordering expanded integration training, with emphasis on cultural exchange and tactical philosophy sharing. We must learn from each other. But the real test of human alliance integration was coming, though none of them knew it yet. 3 weeks after the Kalos Prime exercise, long-range sensors detected something alarming. A massive fleet was approaching Alliance space from the Galactic Rim. The configuration was unlike anything in their databases. Organic ships that seemed to be grown rather than built, pulsing with bioluminescent energy. The first scout ship to investigate never returned. The second transmitted a brief, terrifying message before going silent. They're inside our minds. The psionic swarm had arrived. Within days, 3 frontier worlds fell silent. Refugee ships brought horrifying tales of an enemy that attacked not just physically, but mentally, overwhelming victims with telepathic assaults that drove them mad or turned them against their own. Traditional Alliance shields and armor were useless against an enemy that bypassed physical defenses entirely. An emergency war council convened on Centauri Station. Representatives from every Alliance species gathered, fear palpable in the chamber. The holographic displays showed the swarm's advance, inexorable, devastating, unlike anything they had faced. Our entire military doctrine is based on physical combat, Admiral Thursdayvar said, her serpentine form coiled tightly in distress. We have no defense against psionic attack. The Altarians have some telepathic ability, someone suggested. Perhaps they could. We've tried, an Altarian representative interrupted. The swarm is too powerful. They overwhelmed our telepaths in seconds, turned them into conduits for attacking others. We've had to isolate all our psychically sensitive individuals. Panic was beginning to set in when General Thorne spoke up. Humans have no psionic abilities whatsoever. The room turned to her in confusion. How is that an advantage? Marshal Krex asked. Because it means we're immune to their primary weapon, Thorne explained. You can't telepathically attack a mind that can't receive telepathic signals. It's like trying to hack a computer that isn't connected to any network. Hope flickered in the room, but Thursdayvar voiced the obvious concern. But without psychic abilities, how can you fight them? Their ships are controlled telepathically, their tactics coordinated through hive mind consciousness. You'd be fighting blind. We've been fighting blind our entire existence, Thorne countered. Humans have never had psychic abilities. We've had to develop other ways of understanding and predicting enemy behavior. Pattern recognition, behavioral analysis, game theory. These are the tools we use instead of mind reading. She turned to the tactical display. Show me all available data on swarm attacks. For hours, Thorne and her team analyzed every piece of information. Attack patterns, timing, target selection. Data that seemed random to others began forming patterns to human observers trained to find meaning in chaos. There, Thorne pointed to a series of seemingly unrelated attacks. They're not random. They're following stellar ley lines, theoretical channels of psychic energy. They need these to maintain their hive consciousness over interstellar distances. That's impossible to know without psychic sensitivity, an Altarian protested. No,